We wanted to talk today specifically about understanding your assets and your title and the title on your home before selling.
I always like to talk about things that are kind of real-time examples of client situations. And I have two in the past month. And this is exactly the problem, is that I think generally speaking, clients just assume they understand how they own the title of their property without actually investigating it, which means looking at the old vesting deed or reviewing it, more importantly, with your attorney about how exactly do I own this property? How should I be selling and marketing it? So the first issue was that I had a client who was elderly in nature, very ill, and his daughter thought, well, I'm going to sign everything as power of attorney, which comes with an entire host of issues that need to be developed. So we developed all of those, only to find out that her father actually had retitled the property into a trust, and she was the trustee, which completely shifts the way in which the transaction needs to be framed, the way it should have been disclosed, the way that the sales agreements were signed. And trust can be really particularly challenging because a lot of folks will change their title assets into a trust and never really remember they did it.
Mhm.
And then it's a matter of, how do I go about getting the trust documents? Where are those? I don't even remember doing this. So making sure you've got that benefit of planning is really, really useful. You don't want to find out as a seller or a listing agent for that matter,
Or a
the
buyer.
week before it's wrong, right? Or a buyer. Honestly, you as agents are not real estate attorneys to be able to read these deeds. So if the tenancy is referenced, but you don't really know what it means, well, that could create a situation, which is actually the problem on this other matter that I have. My client owns the property in Rhode Island, and unbeknownst to me, because I had never represented her on that property before, she owned it with a husband who is since predeceased. And it turns out that the tenancy that they had on the deed was tenants in common, which means that his ownership interest needs to now run through probate. We found out on Friday, this Friday that just happened. We were supposed to close the following Thursday. Obviously, that's going to be delayed, not necessarily weeks, probably 1 to 2 months, depending on how quickly the probate court can hear the matter. So it's really a challenge when those types of things are not properly developed at the time of taking the listing or in preparation for the sale. And that's the struggle that we see so often, is if just a small exercise of looking at the deed would have revealed that we need to get the probate done before we can list the property. I mean, the carrying costs that the homeowner now has to absorb to continue allowing that mortgage to stay afloat. We just had one recently where the client was actually in a default situation with an active foreclosure, which isn't something that we had been dealing with in the last year because of COVID, but is now starting to come back into play. We're also starting to see mortgages where folks may have done a modification or a deferral because of COVID, so they were able to get a partial claim. Well, those come back to roost, and those have to be paid. I've had many of those where now there's a second mortgage. Clients are like, what second mortgage? I don't know anything about this. So it's really, really important as a listing agent to make sure that you're properly developing an understanding of who is your client and what does the title reflect and what do they owe? And that's a conversation which hopefully is going to be forthcoming from your clients. Maybe asking them, have you ever had any modifications pursuant to COVID? Did you miss any mortgage payments that you could be in an active foreclosure? Especially for folks that aren't sophisticated in these matters, we really are the people that need to guide them through the process. And it's hard because sometimes people are moving so fast and you ask one question and you get an answer and you just move on to the next question. This is an area where you really need to kind of stop and develop it a little bit better, because otherwise it's going to create for a bumpier transaction.